Alright, so after speculating on it months before its release, of course I was going to make a video on Kingdom Ultra Magnus. And just as he is out of the box, he looks fantastic. But of course, just like I did last time, or when the pre-sale images came out, I'm going to be talking in detail about what's changed and what hasn't, and where it fits into particular Transformers collection. So here he is right next to Siege Ultra Magnus. So here's Kingdom Ultra Magnus. As you can see right off the bat, they're pretty much the same figure, but at the same time, there are a lot of differences. Mostly cosmetic, but I'll get to more of that in a bit. But as you can see here, it's pretty much almost the same figure with slight changes. Okay, but the changes should be enough to consider it an entirely new figure. Yes, it's a heavy retool, but mostly on the aesthetic side. It's not so much a retool in terms of engineering. So let's get to it. There's a lot of differences right off the bat in terms of the sculpting. The head is very different. So the new head is more G1 accurate, whereas the older head was, inspired by G1, but it's mostly to serve its own purpose as a Cybertronian robot. You can also flip the missiles around. I just did this so that it's a little more G1. You still have the clear windows and everything. Same positioning of the flaps. Slight molding differences. And the thing about this is when you sit it next to your Siege Ultra Magnus, your Siege Ultra Magnus is going to look a lot older and dirtier. But then again, I have to remind myself that the apparent age on this is by design. The way it was molded with cream white plastic, which looked like it aged, and the metallic battle damage, all of that is supposed to make the figure look a bit older than it's supposed to be, versus the new Kingdom Ultra Magnus, which looks super fantastic with bright reds, whites, and blues. The white on this is molded for the most part. It's shinier in terms of the plastic than the Siege version. You'll also note that the wheels are different. The leg pads are different. We'll get into the individual differences in a bit. But way before any of the Kingdom products were announced, we saw Kingdom art that looked like it had an Ultra Magnus that looked more like this. Okay, so let me just move the camera around. Okay, so that was what it looked like. Now, according to Emiliano Santolcia, he did reply specifically to that post I made. That was not intended at all to represent any new products for Kingdom or the Studio series. It was just that, they did not have at the time a specific look for Kingdom Ultra Magnus. So that's why they went with this look. But you can see that in terms of being G1, they're fairly close together in how they look. Like even the positioning of the missiles when you flip them downwards, that's pretty accurate. The way the T forms in front of the chest, the pegs on top of the pillars here, the inverted T on the crotch, almost everything is very G1-esque. So that is in terms of the armored robot mode. Now there is no Optimus Prime mode, so to speak, or Naked Ultra Magnus mode for the Masterpiece version. But there is one for Kingdom and Siege, and we'll get to that in a bit. But first, I wanted to take a look at more of the differences in detail. Okay, so real quick, I wanted to point out that the missiles are different between Siege and Kingdom. So it's a lot more detailed in the Siege version, whereas the Kingdom version is definitely more G1-esque. as you can see. And this is a good example of what I'm talking about when it comes to the plastic mold. This is a creamy white, almost dirty color, whereas this is a very pristine white. Very nicely done. Okay, so there's that. Let's take a look at the heads again. So as you can see, those are the heads. More original G1 inspired, but this one is straight up G1. And I also wanted to point out that there is, while there's no light piping on this, there is some attempt at light piping for Ultra Magnus, as you can see here on the back. Okay, let's take a look at the chest. So everything is more G1. This one has panel lining all over. This one does too, but it's more in line with the design of the G1 cartoon. Cleaner pillars as well, as you can see. And the shoulder pads are flatter on the new version, although on this side there's some molded detail. Now I did want to mention that for the forearm armor, or the arm guards, it's a little different blue. It's a little warmer for Siege and a little cooler, more vibrant blue for Kingdom, but essentially they're the same. The red section of the back is, yeah, pretty much the same as well, which you will see again later, but the butt section is different, and you'll see why later when we're in truck mode. And again, different leg panels, which I'll individually tackle. So another thing that I wanted to cover was how different the leg panels were, because some people were saying that they're the same thing. They're not. Several pieces are new. For example, let's call this the first panel. So the first panel is new, and it's a little more an attempt to get into a G1 look by closing off the latter portion near the door. And as you can see, okay, the second panel is pretty much the same. Okay, the third panel is a little different as well. The third panel is just slightly different, although same intention to be more of an open section. The fourth panel, however, is where it starts to get really different, where there's an addition of this molding here, which is missing on this part. Again, to be a little closer to the G1 look, but the fifth panel is entirely different. Now, something I want to mention, the notches have been moved from the fourth panel to the last panel, and the idea of that is to make the trailer part look like it's following the cab instead of being one and the same. We'll see how that works later, but essentially that's what it is. So let's take a look at the unarmored robot mode. And here we are in naked Ultra Magnus, or Optimus Prime mode, whichever one you want to call it, or white Ultra Magnus, or, you know, again, whichever. But as you can see, Siege definitely looks more aged, older, you know, even right out of the box, it already looked like that with a creamy white plastic, whereas now you have this super white plastic molding for Ultra Magnus in Kingdom. So that's the difference there. That's the large difference, but essentially almost everything is the same. Now I'm gonna ignore this lower part because, to be honest, this has been DNA upgraded, so we're not going to discuss the legs so much, but it's pretty much the same mold for the legs and the arms, and almost everything is the same except for the chest section. As you can see, the new chest section is much more modern, earthly. It's almost, you can call this the Earthrise mode, but technically it's from Kingdom. So that's pretty much it in terms of the change. But when you turn him over to the back, there's also a little bit more change. The bumper, which would form the back section, is also different. Again, ignore the legs please, because those have been upgraded for the Siege version. but that's what it looks like from the back. But almost essentially the same thing, essentially the same figure. It's just that, you know, the chest bit is different. Now, to be honest with you, and I'm gonna start talking about this a little more as I go along. So here is Optimus Prime. They look great together, yes, but I don't see why they couldn't have just done a white Optimus Prime. Given all the retooling that they've done, they could have easily just re-released Earthrise Optimus Prime, maybe even bumped it to Commander class, you know, with same concept of a trailer. It could very much have been done, and I do agree that it does come off lazy in terms of execution. Definitely could have been better. Like, as you can see, Optimus Prime's aesthetics here are very nice and svelte, but you know, you have this giant chunky truck in front of Ultra Magnus, serving as supposedly his chest. So that's it's just a little strange. I mean, it's kind of nice on its own, but when you compare it to everything else beside it on its in the property, and the fact that it's supposed to be repainted Optimus Prime to begin with, it's just strange that they went down this route. And there will be some more stranges in a few. I'll show you in a bit. So now that we're in truck mode, this is where it gets painfully obvious how lazy of a job it was. Unlike the Earthrise and Siege Optimus Primes, you could fold the arms, the hands into the forearms, and you can fold the legs in as well. But here, you know, they stick out. So this almost feels like an afterthought. Now, the reason that I'm saying they could have easily gone with just repainting Optimus Prime for this is because they really could have. They already had the Earthrise mold at this point, and they could have just repainted this and, you know, done the molding for the armor on top of it, but they did not. So okay, cool. That's why we get this weird, I don't know what this is. It's supposed to be an Earth truck cab, but the stuff at the back is just making it look a little extra strange than normal. And oh yeah, and let's not forget the fact that the forearms are supposed to hide in the chest bit, you know, with like with any normal Optimus Prime figure, but here they're kind of just, hello, they're just kind of stuck there. So it gets a little more interesting when you try to transform it into its third mode, which is the car carrier mode. And I find the differences in how they transformed it interesting, but I don't know. I don't know how you guys will feel about it. I'll let you guys decide. To assemble it all together in the car carrier mode before attaching it to the cab. So as you can see, I'll be doing that now. Hold on. So you simply connect that here and then make sure these things that grab hold just enter the notches properly. It's a little more difficult if you have the DNA kit, which is what we have here. Okay, there you go. And so the idea is to have an RID, Robots in Disguise style, one single block type carrier, but it's gonna be a little different for the Kingdom version, where the idea is for it to be a trailer of sorts. So we're gonna go ahead and connect these. You're not going to need to connect this set of pillars to the carrier the same way, so you don't need to do anything like that over there. The notches are not going to be in the same place. They're going to be a little farther. They're on the second section over here, so that's where you push them in. And then, so basically you have a notch here and a notch here for the things that grab hold. Claws whatever you want to call them. So that's what you do. Do the same on the other side. And there you go. So you'll notice that it's gonna be a little longer because the idea, the look that they're going for is that this is a cap that's trailing along, a trailer versus, you know, one whole car carrier. So it's just a wee bit longer, as you can see. Whether it's a successful attempt, I'll leave it up to you. Okay, but if it were up to me, no, it's not that successful an attempt. I would say that this is probably all of the vehicle modes are the weakest portions of this particular iteration. So we were kind of hoping for more of something like this. Sorry, it's not transformed properly, but you get the idea. But instead we got something that was like an earthified, is that even a word, version of the Siege carrier, which can only really put cars on top of it. You can't put any cars inside or anything like that. But as far as the colors go, they look great. It's just not the greatest in terms of execution, in terms of vehicle mode. So just to highlight really quick, this is essentially what we were kind of expecting to get in vehicle mode, but what we got instead was, I'm not really sure. But yeah, all I can say is hopefully with the fan response that we've been getting so far for Ultra Magnus, Kingdom Ultra Magnus, they would be kind of pushed to probably make a better one. We haven't had a G1-esque Ultra Magnus pretty much ever. So this is still a chance for them to do something like that. We've gotten pretty much every single major character ever except for the G1 Ultra Magnus, and I'm hoping that in the future that's something that they'll do. Here we have a bit of a comparison of the sizes in robot mode. So while some people were worried about, you know, Ultra Magnus being a little smaller than he's supposed to, don't worry, he still towers over Optimus Prime as he should, and he still does the same over Hot Rod. Now, if you have a Rodimus Prime figure, I'm gonna bring out the Power of the Primes version. He's still taller, so we're still good there. So the intention of Ultra Magnus has always been to tower over his teammates, right? So there, it's done pretty well still without upgrade kits, although we will have another video that will cover that later. I will, however, compare him to the Legends Ultra Magnus, and he's definitely shorter, but with an upgrade kit he'll catch up, and we'll talk about that in a separate video. Anyway, so that was just my quick review of Kingdom Ultra Magnus. There's still a lot of stuff that I haven't mentioned but have been covered by other reviewers. Go take a look at their reviews as well. You know, stuff like the wheels, the weapons, stuff like that, and the transformation, I kind of left those out. I just really wanted to focus on the stuff that we also discussed in the previous video. Like I said, great robot mode, but the alt mode needed a lot of work, and could have been so much better probably if we just got an Earthrise Optimus Prime repaint with armor pieces on top of him. That would have been great. That would have been swell. But this is what we have, and I'm hoping that in future Ultra Magnus releases they'll do better. Anyway, so yeah, that's been my take on Kingdom Ultra Magnus. Till next time, peace out.